Imagine a scenario that um, I think pretty much every single person listening to this has been in at least once.
Oh, I can already guess where this is going.
Right. It's the classic crisis meeting. Maybe a huge project has gone completely off the rails,
Hmm.
or a client is furious, or your server's just completely crashed on Black Friday.
Absolute nightmare fuel.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the room is just absolute chaos. People are shouting, they're pointing fingers, trying to assign blame, or they're just, generally panicking.
High volume, very low solution, the standard corporate meltdown.
Yeah, exactly that. But then you look over to the corner of the table, and there sits one person who is completely silent,
Just watching.
just watching. They aren't checking their phone. They aren't sweating. They definitely aren't yelling. To the untrained eye, they just look, well, checked out, maybe even frozen by the stress.
Right, but if you could actually hear what's happening inside that quiet person's head, it would probably sound like a supercomputer. Just processing data at light speed. They aren't panicked at all. They're actually deconstructing the panic.
And that image, that calm in the middle of the storm, is the perfect introduction to our deep dive today. We are looking at a personality type that essentially turns silence into a weapon against chaos.
It's a fascinating profile.
It really is. Today, we are unpacking the FFAN, which is also known as the silent researcher.
Silent researcher is just such a great title. It hints at exactly what they're doing. I mean, they aren't just being quiet to be polite, right? They're actively investigating the reality in front of them.
Now, before we get into the gears of how this specific person thinks, we need to set the stage a bit for you all. We are analyzing this through the lens of the Max Energy ME80 personality system.
Right.
And for those who are maybe new to our deep dives on this particular system, this is not your standard online personality test.
No, not at all. Most tests, they label you based on behavior. Like you are outgoing or you are shy.
Yeah, the surface stuff.
Exactly. But the ME80 system is more like a physics engine. It looks at energy flow. It asks, how do you process energy from the world? How do you metabolize it internally? And then how do you push it back out?
So we aren't looking at what the FAN does. We're looking at how their engine actually runs.
Precisely. And the FAN engine is just a beautiful piece of machinery.
Let's start right at the top then. If we had to give the FFAN a core identity, like a hero section on their internal website, what's the headline from the report?
The defining statement for the silent researcher is this: they exist in the gaps between relationships and systems.
In the gaps between relationships and systems.
Yeah. Their whole mission is asking quietly downward to dissect chaos and uncover the true structure beneath it all.
That phrasing is so evocative. In the gaps. It sounds almost like they are the mortar in a brick wall.
Oh, that is a perfect analogy. Think about that brick wall. The bricks are the loud things, the big events, the people, the obvious glaring problems.
And everyone looks at the bricks.
Everyone looks at the bricks. But the FFAN looks at the mortar, the invisible stuff that's actually holding it all together. They operate in the spaces that everyone else ignores. So while everyone else is reacting to the surface noise, the FFAN is looking at the mechanics that caused the noise in the first place.
Okay, so if the team is arguing about who made the mistake, the FFAN is sitting there thinking about what part of the system allowed the mistake to happen.
Exactly. Their core method is asking quietly downward. They will never accept the surface answer.
Give me an example of that.
Sure. If you tell an FAN, hey, the server crashed because of high traffic, they won't just nod and say, okay. They will ask downward. They'll ask, why was the traffic unexpected? Why did the load balancer fail? Is this a technical failure, or is it a failure in how we predict user behavior?
They just keep drilling down until they hit bedrock.
Yes, because for them, understanding isn't just a hobby. It is literally a form of resistance.
Resistance against chaos.
Exactly. The source material puts it beautifully. It says their understanding is not meant to soothe. It is a force through which order can be rebuilt.
Wow.
They fundamentally believe that you cannot fix a relationship or an institution with a Band-Aid. You have to find the structural fracture.
That feels like a very specific philosophy of control. Not, controlling people, but controlling the chaos of the world itself.
That's it, exactly. And that brings us to their control mechanism. When the world catches fire, the silent researcher steps back to gain what the report calls a longer time horizon.
Which is the exact opposite of the fight-or-flight response most of us have in a fire.
Right. Most people react to the right now. The FAN rejects the now. They take the current event and place it into a much broader systemic framework. They translate emotional problems into logical ground.
So they aren't going to pat your back and tell you it's all going to be okay.
No, they don't soothe the emotion. They rebuild the order so that the problem causing the emotion actually stops existing.
They fix the reality so the emotion becomes unnecessary, which, if you think about it, is really the ultimate form of care.
It really is. It's profoundly caring, just not in a huggy way.
Right. Okay, I want to get under the hood of this engine. The Max Energy ME80 system talks about an energy matrix, basically the operating system for the personality. How does the FFAN engine actually run?
It operates on a 4-step rhythmic progression. It's a continuous loop of observation, deconstruction, modeling, and finally, action.
And action is the very last step.
Always last. And this is crucial for anyone listening who might be living or working with an FFAN. What looks like passivity or silence is actually sustained high-load internal analysis.
Their internal CPU is running at 100%.
Exactly. They are deliberately abstracting emotion to maintain total objectivity so they can build a proper model of the problem.
Let's break this down layer by layer, because the ME80 system uses specific terms here, IP, IQ, EQ, the axioms, but they have very distinct definitions in this context. Let's start with the first layer, IP.
Right. So in the system, IP stands for the inner value layer. This is defined as the energy driving impulse.
So for the silent researcher, what is that impulse?
It's the spark. It isn't necessarily a moral value like justice or fairness. It's an intellectual hunger. It's that nagging sense that something here doesn't fit.
Like an anomaly detector.
Exactly. It's the curiosity that wakes up when things just don't make sense. Without this impulse, without a puzzle to solve, the rest of the machine doesn't even turn on. They need the mystery.
Okay, so IP is the ignition key. Next is the second layer, IQ, which the report calls the emotional activation layer. Now, usually when we hear IQ, we think of math tests or logic puzzles. But that's not what it means here, is it?
No, and this is a really critical distinction in the max energy system. Here, IQ refers specifically to intuition and rapid judgment.
Wait, the silent researcher, the most analytical person in the room, relies on intuition.
They do, but it's a very specific type of intuition. It's the scanner. It's how the FFAN quickly assesses the vibe or the pattern of a situation.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, even though they are deeply analytical, this layer is incredibly fast. It's the intuition that tells them this data looks wrong or the tension in this room is actually originating from that one specific person.
So it's kind of like an experienced mechanic listening to a car engine.
Yeah.
They don't need to take the whole thing apart to know something is wrong. They can just hear the rhythm is off.
Exactly. It's rapid pattern recognition. And that fast scan guides them on where to focus their deep, slow analysis later.
That makes a lot of sense. So we have the spark, which is IP, and the scan, which is IQ. Then we move to the third layer, EQ, the decision calculation layer. And again, usually EQ means empathy, right? Feeling what others feel.
Right, but in this specific deep dive, EQ is defined as emotional detachment and comprehension.
Detachment. It sounds a little cold.
It sounds cold, but it's actually highly functional. It's not about feeling the feelings, it's about comprehending them.
Like understanding the mechanics of the feeling.
Yes. The FFAN steps back. They see your anger, they understand your anger, they can map the exact root cause of your anger, but they do not become angry themselves.
And they don't catch the virus. They study it under a microscope.
That is the perfect metaphor. That detachment is what allows them to make a calculation. They process human emotions as data points.
So they're thinking, okay, the boss is angry because of the deadline. The client is anxious because of the budget.
Exactly. These are just variables to be factored into the final solution. They aren't waves to be swept away by.
That really explains why they can seem distant during a crisis. They aren't ignoring you. They are analyzing you to save you.
Precisely. And that brings us to the fourth and final layer, the manifestation layer. This is the energy released outward.
The actual result.
The action. After the spark, the scan, and the calculation, they finally act. And because of all that intense internal processing, the action is usually precise, heavy, and very impactful.
It's the sniper shot rather than the machine gun spray.
Yes, they do not waste energy. When they finally speak, it changes the geometry of the room.
Okay, so we've got the engine mapped out. Now let's talk about the driver. What are the deep inner traits that come from this specific setup?
The report focuses heavily on questioning downward.
Right, this is their superpower. Understanding is their absolute weapon. The source material uses a really great analogy here. Imagine a bridge has just collapsed.
Right.
Most people are looking at the debris. right? They're crying over the wreckage or they're rushing to clear the road. But the silent researcher is like the structural engineer who completely ignores the debris and just looks at the remaining pillars.
They aren't looking at the tragedy, they are looking at the physics.
Right. They are gathering clues in silence. They deconstruct this turbulent, chaotic event into analyzable structures. They're looking for the pressure points. Why did it break here? What was the load? Was the design fundamentally flawed?
They translate the tragedy back into a blueprint.
Exactly. And by turning a chaotic, emotional event into a structural problem, they make it solvable. That is incredibly powerful. However, every hero has a weakness. This level of deep processing has to come with a cost. What is the shadow blind spot for the FFAN?
The report calls it over-extrapolation.
Meaning they just think way too much.
Basically, yes. The essence of the flaw is that thinking too deeply can actually slow down their pace of action. Because they want to verify absolutely everything. They want to find the absolute root cause to reduce any margin of error so they can get stuck in endless analytical loops.
Analysis paralysis.
Exactly. They keep simulating the solution in their head to make sure it's perfect. But the real world moves in real time. So often they figure out the perfect, flawless solution, but the meeting ended 10 minutes ago.
Oh man, that is heartbreakingly relatable. You finally have the perfect answer, but the window of opportunity has closed.
It is the tragedy of the silent researcher, and the source mentions a very specific internal consequence of this. Stress for an FFAN compresses inward.
Compresses inward.
Yeah, they rarely explode outwardly. If they are stressed, you won't see them yelling or throwing things. Instead, they build up psychological weight. They just carry it.
So if you see an FFAN who is even quieter than usual, that is a massive red flag. They are carrying a heavy load.
It's like a pressure cooker with the release valve stuck.
Let's pivot to how this looks to other people. We talked about them being the quiet one in the meeting. How does that impact their social relations? The source describes their vibe as quiet weightiness.
Yes, quiet weightiness. They speak very little, obviously. But the dynamic is really fascinating. Even though they are quiet, people often feel comprehensively seen by them.
How can I feel seen if you aren't even talking to me?
Because when they do look at you, you can feel that they aren't just looking at your face. They are looking at your context. They maintain this observer's position. They are never fighting for airtime.
Right.
So when they finally do speak, it brings what the report calls clarity with pressure.
Clarity with pressure. That is a really powerful phrase.
It means their words have gravity. They cut right through the noise. But, and this is so important, the FFAN only reveals their authentic depth within relationships of genuine trust.
They have gatekeeper.
A very heavy one. Until they trust you, you are just data to them. You're part of the system. But once they trust you, they will share the blueprint of the universe with you.
So if you have an FFAN friend or a colleague, patience is key. You really have to earn that access.
Absolutely. You cannot force that door open.
Let's talk business value. If I am a CEO or a team leader listening to this, why do I need a silent researcher on my team? Because honestly, they sound a little slow.
Well, you need them because speed without direction is just crashing faster.
Fair point.
Their key strength is deconstructing chaotic events into clear pathways. In a corporate setting, they are the ultimate tool for limiting damage and clarifying priorities.
And we all need damage control.
But it's not just cleanup. They propose institution-level solutions. They don't just want to fix the bug in the software. They want to rewrite the entire coding protocol so that the bug never happens again.
They fix the mortar.
Yes. They translate complex messiness into executable logic. If you are in a volatile industry, an FFAN is your anchor.
The report actually lists some specific professional fields where they thrive. Let's run through these because if there are any silent researchers listening, this might be a great career guide.
The first one is pretty obvious: research, analysis, and strategic planning. Any role where the core job is to distill logic from massively complex information.
Makes total sense. Data science, market research, that sort of thing.
Then there is risk assessment and system design. Building models that are internally coherent. If you need a system that absolutely won't break under pressure, like designing a bridge or running a financial hedge fund, get an FFAN to design it.
Because they've already spent hours thinking about exactly how it could break.
Exactly. Organizational diagnosis and process optimization is another big one. They are fantastic at seeing the bottlenecks that everyone else has just gotten used to.
Right. The invisible inefficiencies.
And finally, any role requiring long-term causal reasoning. Think high-level strategy consulting or deep investigation.
Like the detective we mentioned at the very start of the show.
Yes, the detective who solves the case not by chasing the bad guy down the street, but by sitting in the quiet office, staring at the timeline until the pattern emerges.
I love that image. So as we start to wrap up this deep dive, let's try to synthesize all of this. What is the ultimate truth of the FFAN?
Their strength is not in noise. It's so easy to overlook them because our world heavily rewards the loud. But the silent researcher's golden moment is that split second when the truth emerges.
Yeah.
It's when the structure becomes visible again. Their mission is basically to make the world comprehensible. When things are broken and confusing and scary, the FFAN is the one who steps up and says, here's how it works, and here's exactly how we fix it.
That is a deeply comforting thought. Just knowing that someone is watching the machinery while the rest of us are busy watching the show.
It is, and it connects to a final provocative thought I have for our listeners today.
Let's hear it.
We live in a world of constant notification, instant reaction, and just endless noise. So I want you to ask yourself in your own life, are you just reacting to the noise? Are you just splashing water on the fire? Or are you, like the silent researcher, willing to step back, endure the silence, and wait for the structure to reveal itself?
Wow. That is something I'm definitely going to be thinking about during my next chaotic meeting. Maybe I'll actually try just staying quiet for 5 minutes and see what happens.
You might change everything.
Now, before we sign off, we absolutely need to give credit where it's due. This entire analysis, the breakdown of the layers, the shadow traits, all of this comes from the Max Energy ME80 Personality Assessment Report.
It's an incredibly detailed system. We've really only scratched the surface of this one type today.
Truly. So if this deep dive resonated with you, or if you're sitting there wondering, wait, am I a silent researcher?
Yeah.
You might want to look a little deeper. You can find out more about your own energy matrix by visiting their official website at www.maxenergylife.com.
Or, if you prefer social media, you can search on Facebook for Max Energy Ali or Meta Energy in.
It's absolutely worth a look. Understanding your own operating system is really the first step to using it effectively.
I couldn't agree more.
Well, thank you for guiding us through the fascinating mind of the silent researcher today.
My pleasure, anytime.
And to our listeners, embrace the silence. You never know what you might find there. We'll see you on the next deep dive.